Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham. Millions in the Northeast are hunkering down in what could end in some places as an historic blizzard. Thanks to travel bans and canceled flights, much of the region is at a standstill. Heather Sells has more.
The worst storm of 2015 is moving in today with up to 2 feet expected in some areas.
This is going to be a significant storm.
It should not be taken lightly.
Overnight, however, forecasters rolled back some of their most dire predictions about the storm. Instead of 3 feet of snow and hurricane-force winds, they're now talking 2 feet and lesser winds. Still, authorities are taking no chances. They've banned travel on the roads in places like Rhode Island and New York City. The blizzard is expected to rage all Tuesday, with most warnings on through midnight. After that, hundreds of thousands could lose power for days. It's one reason why Operation Blessing has staged a response site in Tuckerton, New Jersey.
We're ready to serve hot meals, we're ready to do food distributions. We're also ready to send volunteer teams out and help vulnerable populations like single moms, elderly, handicapped.
Airline passengers have already felt the brunt of the storm. The airlines have canceled more than 5,000 flights from coast to coast.
They just keep on pushing us around a little bit. I mean, what are you going to do? It's 30 inches of snow.
I'm exhausted and annoyed, and I just want to go home.
It's unlikely that regular airport travel will resume until Wednesday. For now, it's time for millions to wait out the storm and hope for the best. Heather Sells, CBN News.
The FBI says it's nabbed a Russian spy ring in New York City. Agents picked up banker Evgeny Buryakov yesterday morning. 2 others will be charged today. The indictment says Buryakov spent 2 years spying on businessmen and trying to recruit other spies to help. It's been 5 years since authorities busted Russian spy Anna Chapman and others for similar crimes. Today, House Committee is holding its 3rd public hearing on the 2012 attacks on the American embassy in Benghazi, Libya, that left 4 Americans dead. But there's little hope of bipartisan cooperation. Democrats say they've been excluded from crucial steps in the investigation, and Republicans say Democrats are playing politics. Meanwhile, reports of a hostage situation in a luxury hotel in Tripoli. Security officials say gunmen stormed the hotel, killing at least 3 guards and taking some people hostage. It's the same hotel where Libya's former prime minister was kidnapped back in 2013. Libyan militants are now claiming responsibility for kidnapping at least 20 Coptic Christians in 2 separate incidents in the last 2 months. 7 of them were abducted from their car in late December while driving from Sirte back to Egypt. At the start of this month, armed men raided a building in Sirte and abducted another 13 Christians from their homes. Muslims were allowed to go free. Photos of all 20 hostages were posted online back on January 12th. More than 1 million Egyptian workers remain caught in the middle of the fighting between warring factions in Libya. Former Cuban dictator Fidel Castro is finally speaking out about his country opening up diplomatic ties with the United States. The 88-year-old released a statement saying he does not trust the U.S., but he's still open to peaceful solutions. The letter was written to Cuban students and read aloud on state television. Castro has been silent on the issue since President Obama announced December 17th he was restoring diplomatic ties with the communist regime. The comments come after last week's high-level talks between the U.S. and Cuba in Havana. New video obtained by an Israeli news organization provides incriminating evidence of Iran's nuclear weapon ambitions. It also indicates the country is pursuing an aggressive missile program with worldwide implications. Here's CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem.
The video taken from satellite images by Israel's Eres-B satellite reveals a 27-meter or nearly 90-foot tall missile. This never-before-seen missile and launch site stands outside Tehran and appears capable of sending a rocket into space or launching an ICBM. Some reports indicate the Pentagon estimates it might have been 2 years in development. Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Dory Gold says this latest revelation clearly poses a clear and present danger to America.
Originally, many in the U.S. think of Iran as, well, you know, that's a problem for Saudi Arabia or Israel, but it's not our problem. That's not true. The trend in Iranian planning for long-range missiles that can eventually reach the eastern seaboard of the United States, that's a given now.
Gold says the Iranian nuclear and missile threat prompted Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to accept U.S. House Speaker John Boehner's invitation to address a joint session of Congress early in March. Despite the potential political fallout, he'll use the platform to warn America and the world about the growing danger. Yet the White House and Congress differ on how to respond to the Iranian threat. The administration wants to negotiate, while congressional leaders from both parties prefer any negotiations to include the threat of sanctions. Senate Democrat Bob Menendez recently made this startling comment.
The more I hear from the administration and its quotes, the more it sounds like talking points that come straight out of Tehran.
Republican Senator Bob Corker told Jerusalem news agencies he can't understand why the president promises to veto upcoming congressional legislation about Iran even before it's been written.
For Congress not to have the ability to weigh in on this, which has such geopolitical importance and a place where Congress has played such an important role, is ridiculous and candidly irresponsible for Congress not to play a role.
Iran, the U.S., and 5 other nations negotiating Iran's nuclear program have set a June 30th deadline for reaching a final settlement. Some leaders on both sides of the Atlantic believe the expanding nuclear and missile program represents Iran's ultimate goals of attacking what it calls the little Satan Israel and the great Satan, the United States. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
President Obama is in Saudi Arabia today. He's paying respects to the royal family following the death of King Abdullah. The president cut the final day of his visit to India trip short to make this trip. A bipartisan delegation of lawmakers is traveling with the president, including 2 senior U.S. officials and 2 former secretaries of state. Members of a U.S. government panel are offering to take the punishment for a blogger sentenced to 1,000 lashes in Saudi Arabia. Christianity Today reports 7 members of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom signed a letter to the Saudi ambassador. They volunteered to take 100 lashes apiece on behalf of Raif Badawi. Badawi is a Muslim convicted of writing the blog Free Saudi Liberals, which called for open discussion of political and religious topics in the kingdom. The letter is signed by Christian, Muslim, and Jewish members of the commission. It says compassion is a virtue shared by many faiths, and the signers are united in a sense of obligation to condemn and resist injustice and to suffer with its victims. Gas prices have plunged across the U.S. in recent months. While Americans see it as a chance to save some cash, politicians see it as a chance to raise your taxes. As Paul Strand explained, some are fighting back, saying it's an outrageous idea.
The sweet relief of plunging prices at the pump. But now the gas is so cheap, some politicians are plotting to raise the federal tax on gasoline from its current 18.4 cents a gallon, figuring drivers might not even notice. Economist Stephen Moore.
People like Nancy Pelosi and Senator Schumer and even some Republicans, regrettably, have said now is, quote, the ideal time to raise the gas tax. I think this is absolutely the worst time to raise the gas tax because consumers have finally gotten a break on their gas prices.
And that's good news because so many households haven't seen their incomes improving much, if at all, in recent years.
Now we're finally getting a break with these lower gas prices. It's something that American consumers and families really need is the break, and Congress wants to tax it away.
Moore points out a hike in gas taxes would deal a real body blow to a recovering economy and the consumers who fuel it.
Every penny of increase in gas tax takes over $1 billion out of the pockets of American consumers.
What's ironic is we were never supposed to have a permanent federal gas tax. It was supposed to be around just long enough to fund building the nation's interstate freeway system. That was a big priority of President Eisenhower's to improve the nation's security. And that was pretty much finished way back in 1969.
It was supposed to expire and sunset when the interstate highway system was completed. And of course, that was now many decades ago, and it's been extended over and over and over again.
Moore hopes the newly empowered Republicans who now control both houses of Congress will be too smart to hike this tax.
If the first thing they were to do in Washington is raise the gas tax on the middle class, I think you would get a revolt among voters saying, what good are these people? We could put them in office to cut our taxes, not to raise them.
Kirpin, who heads up a group that wants to cut big government down to size, thinks the GOP should even go the other way and let the tax automatically die when most of it is set to expire in September of 2016.
We should finally let this be the time that it expires.
Moore agrees.
I would get rid of the federal gas tax altogether, let the states determine what their highest transportation needs are, and let the local people decide where we need the roads, where we need the highways, where we need the bridges, and just get Washington out of the way.
Kirpin says states could do these road and bridge projects better and cheaper.
Without all the federal rules and regulations and strings that come attached with sending our money to Washington so it can run through a huge bureaucracy and be sent back.
If the federal gas tax goes away and states handle it all, taxpayers will probably save around 10 cents a gallon. And most motorists will likely be happier knowing the feds are out of their local decisions about their local highways and bridges. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Arlington, Virginia.
Coming up, signs in the heavens. More blood moons are on the way. Why they could be a harbinger of what's to come for Israel and key events around the world. Today, millions around the globe are marking International Holocaust Remembrance Day. In Poland, Holocaust survivors and world leaders are honoring the 70th anniversary of the liberation from the German concentration camp Auschwitz. The presidents of Germany and Austria attended the event. Russian President Vladimir Putin was not invited because Poland's government is critical of Russia's actions in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the U.S. is honoring Holocaust victims and survivors with its annual Days of Remembrance. State and local governments and workplaces are hosting observances and remembrance activities in their communities as well. Well, we first told you about blood moons nearly a year ago, and more than 1 million people have watched that story online. Many say when these mysterious signs in the sky appear, it means something big is about to happen in Israel and the Middle East, and possibly the world. We saw 2 blood moons in 2014 and 2 more coming this year. Eric Stakelbeck talked with Pastor John Hagee about what they could mean in the year ahead and beyond.
The book of Genesis says God uses the sun, moon, and stars for signs and seasons. Examples can be found throughout the Bible. Think of how a star led the wise men to Jesus, or the sun stood still as Joshua led Israel to victory over its enemies. According to Pastor John Hagee, God is getting ready to speak this way once again.
There's a sense in the world that things are changing, and God is trying to communicate with us in a supernatural way. I believe that in these next 2 years, we're going to see something dramatic happen in the Middle East involving Israel that will change the course of history in the Middle East and impact the whole world.
In his latest book, 4 Blood Moons, Hagee lays out what he calls celestial signals. He describes how a series of blood moons in 2014 and 2015 will have great significance for Israel. Although single blood moons are a fairly regular occurrence, 4 of them appearing so closely together is extremely rare.
We've only seen a series of blood moons a handful of times over the past 500 years. So what exactly is a blood moon, and what is the biblical significance of it?
A blood moon is when the earth comes between the sun and the moon, and the sun is shining through the atmosphere of the earth and cast upon the moon a red shadow, and so the moon appears to be red.
Such moons appear in Scripture. In the book of Joel, God says there will be wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. In Acts, the Apostle Peter repeats that verse from Joel. And the book of Revelation says that during the Great Tribulation, the moon will become like blood.
The sun and the moon and the earth are controlled by God Almighty. He is the one that's getting them in a direct alignment on a certain day at a certain time, but each time it's a Passover or Sukkot.
In the past, the rare appearance of 4 blood moons on these feast days has coincided with major events for Israel and the Jewish people. 1492, Spain expelled the Jews. Columbus also discovered America, which became a safe haven for the Jewish people.
In each of these blood moons, you have something that begins with a tragedy and ends in triumph.
1948, Israel is reborn as a nation.
After 2,000 years, God supernaturally brought them from 66 nations, and a nation was born in a day. That, again, was a supernatural something that happened following the tragedy of the Holocaust.
1967, Israel wins the Six-Day War and recaptures Jerusalem.
For the first time in 2,000 years, Jerusalem and the state of Israel were together again.
We already witnessed 2 blood moons in 2014, and they coincided with major events in the Middle East and the world. A war between Israel and Hamas, the rise of ISIS and the emergence of a new caliphate in Syria and Iraq, terrorism increasing around the world, Russia seizing the Crimea, and anti-Semitism on the march in Europe. Then there are continued attempts by the world to strike a deal with Iran, which promised to only increase in 2015.
The only reason Iran will not develop a nuclear bomb will be that Israel chooses a military solution to that crisis. I believe if that happens, that will start a series of events that will change the course of world history. If Israel does not, it will still change the course of world history.
Hagee warns of the Iranian nuclear threat through his work with Christians United for Israel, which he founded in 2006. It is now the largest pro-Israel organization in America, with some 1.3 million members.
If there was ever a time for the Christians of America to stiffen their spine and stand up and speak up, it's now. To see evil and not call it evil is evil.
He says it's still unclear what the coming blood moons will bring, but he is certain of one thing.
When all is said and done, Israel is going to prevail. The flag of Israel will be flying over the walls of the city of Jerusalem when Messiah comes, and it's going to be forever. And every nation that rises up in judgment against Israel, God will punish and punish severely.
Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, San Antonio, Texas.
Up next, an American war hero comes to Israel and suits up for a new role, lending a hand in its military. Every year, thousands of Jews and Christians from around the world volunteer to join the Israel Defense Forces. While everyone that gives his time is special, one U.S. veteran is standing out as a hero.
Brian Mast served as a U.S. Army bomb disposal expert in Afghanistan when a hidden explosive device took his legs. But that didn't stop him from volunteering for the IDF.
I saw a need in my own country to show positive support for Israel, and I wanted to find a way to do it, so I did.
As Mast watched news coverage of fighting in and around Gaza last summer, he grew frustrated with how the media and world leaders criticized Israel, even though it was under fire. Mast said as a soldier he couldn't agree with the criticism of Israel for defending itself.
If any of our neighbors, whether it be Canada or Cuba or Mexico, were firing rockets into the United States, that guys like me or guys that I served with or anybody else in our military, we would be in those locations immediately to destroy those enemies so that they would never be able to have the capability to do that again.
The conflict, he said, lit a fire under him, and he wanted to come and help.
Coming from a soldier background, I spent 12 years in the service. I wanted to find a way to do that militarily.
Brian came to Israel through a program called SAR-L. It brings volunteers from all over the world to help the IDF. Here they're assembling medical kits for soldiers in the field.
We're packaging narcotics that could be used like morphine. We're packaging tourniquets. We're packaging IVs. These are all things that combat medics carry with them. I myself had 3 tourniquets placed on me when I was injured, and this is the kind of stuff that they need.
Over the years, more than 160,000 volunteers have served through the program. Now about 20% of those volunteers are Christians. SAR-L head Israel Gava said the volunteers help with logistics. That frees up soldiers and reservists for other duties.
And they give a hand in maintaining and keeping this equipment. As you see here, this is medical equipment. In some bases you may find people working on controls or in communication equipment, and this is all over the country, almost more than 40 bases.
Corporal Leah Calderoni is a liaison between the base and the volunteers. She says Brian has been a big hit on the base.
I think for all the soldiers that are here also in the base, it's an inspiration. It's a sort of hero also in Israel.
Mass says he was raised in a Christian home that supported Israel and learned Israel was America's brother and greatest ally in the region. That's the message he'll take home.
You know, one of the terms I've learned since being here is the term ahim, the term brothers. And I think that we in the U.S. and those here in Israel, I think we are brothers because we have the same hope and the same desire for the future. We want to see freedom.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the IDF's Medical Supply Center, Tel Aviv, Israel.
A hero at home and a big hand in Israel. Hats off to you. Stay with us. We are coming right back. And finally this hour, CBN is bringing Superbook to the Karenni people in Myanmar, also known as Burma. The Karenni have been displaced from their homes inside the country. CBN is teaming up with a local ministry dedicated to helping them. CBN just finished dubbing the first Superbook episode into their tribal language and sent a team equipped with a projector and a screen into the jungles so people could watch it. You can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international. And that is going to do it for this hour of CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We want to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Certainly hope you'll join us right here again next time. It is Tuesday. Make it a terrific one, everybody.